Good morning, doctor. I'm Xiao Zhengji from Group DMAP, and this is our proposed solution, Doc2U, which is a diseases and symptom checkers. Like all humans, doctors will tend to make mistakes or misdiagnose a patient. Furthermore, the lack of staff or manpower in the hospital could lead to a lower level of medical attention towards the patients, resulting in mishandling of patients. In this case, short-handed staff also can lead to a major problem as some of the patients may not be able to receive enough medical attention when needed, which can result in death. Hence, we decided to propose an application that helps doctors in the daily work of diagnosing a patient and monitor the condition of a patient. Doc2U is an artificial intelligence application that is proposed to help and assist the doctors to diagnose efficiently, reduce human errors, and monitor a patient's health. So, to come to the current problem, what factor causes misdiagnosis during diagnostic process? First of all is the cognitive bias, which included the time pressure, emotional distress, and hunger that cause misdiagnosis problems. And that is a human error as doctors or practitioners sometimes diagnose a patient wrongly as some of the symptoms shown on the patients are similar to a few diseases with varying severity. So come to what factors causes mishandling of patients during diagnostic process. It's including that the low number of medical practitioners that increases the ratio of doctors to patients or nurses to doctors, and that it increasing the chances of doctors or nurses to not be available when they are required when emergency arise. Next was the lack of manpower that is required to be on standby for every patient to monitor their health progress and any health-threatening threats. So the usual requirements in our project is mainly for two parts, which one is the medical practitioners and patients. For the medical practitioners, nurse is one of it that we help them to monitor the health of the patient, and for the doctors, we assist in collecting and analyze the patient data and give the medical advices. For the patients, we tend to help them to receive better medical attention. From the process of emphasize, mostly symptom checking results given by general practitioner doctors mostly are based on the correlations alone, and correlation is not causation of the illnesses. However, other than increasing the number of health practitioners, a more effective method in monitoring hospitalized patients could be done to reduce the task and burden on the doctors and nurses. So that we propose a solution that is capable of possible list of illness based on the symptoms of the patient and hospitalized patients in a lifetime environment. For the capable of shortlist possible list of illness, we filtering the illness based on the symptoms experiences and list out the possible diseases. And for the hospitalized patient, we monitor the heartbeats of the patients, blood pressure, blood oxygen saturation, and blood temperature, and can sound a notification to the desk on each ward to notify them if the patients have any drop in their station. So that our goal of solution is to create a more efficient method of diagnosis, provide assistance to medical practitioner in diagnosing process, provide illness list based on symptoms to medical practitioner, and provide a lifetime monitoring on hospitalized patients. That's all from me, and I'll pass it to my friends.
Today I'll be explaining about knowledge representation. Knowledge representation is where we see how an AI acts with a given data or information. So the first one is, if input symptom has value, then match sickness is on. This is when the user or the doctor has entered the symptoms into the system or into the AI, and the match sickness will turn on. Basically, the AI will turn on when there's an input into the symptoms. And if second one is, if match symptom is on and input system has value, then list sickness is on, is set listed. So this means that if match sickness, which means going to the first point, that there is input into the symptoms, and there's a match to the symptoms, the list will be on the list. If third one is if list sickness has value, then show list. This means that if the list has some symptoms listed, some of the disease or medical attention that's listed already from the second point, then it will show the list. Number 4 is if show list is true and choose sick is true, then show medication is set. This is when the list is already listed for the doctors and practitioners to see, and if they choose one of the symptoms or one of the diseases listed, then it will show the medication for that sickness. Number 5 is if CBP is on and C blood oxygen and saturation is on and C blood temperature is on, then monitor patient is set. So this is when we know that there is a patient on the bed with all this equipment set up. So the AI knows that there is a patient and it will turn on to monitor the patient 24/7. Number 6 is if list sickness is no list and input system has value and match sickness is on, then input system equals no value and match system off and re-input system is set. This is when the patients or the practitioners or the doctors input the system and there is no list, means that there is an impossible set of sickness with the listed symptoms. It will be asked the users to re-input the symptoms with a more specific or slightly different symptoms to match it properly. Number 7 is if CBP is low or C the blood saturation is low or the blood temperature is low, then it will notify the staffs on hand. So the staffs won't have to keep an eye 24/7. Number 8 is if C blood pressure error or blood oxygen saturation is error or blood temperature is error, then notify is on. This shows that there is an error inside the machine to look at all this data. So this will notify the staff to look onto the machine and change it if necessary. Number 9 is if the blood pressure, blood oxygen saturation or blood temperature is high, it will also notify the staff because the patient needs medical attention immediately. Next is state space search. It is a more detailed type of knowledge representation which we can see. The first one, since there is two features in the AI, the first goal is users will be able to detect the patient's symptoms and detect its disease and appropriate medication. So we can start looking on the right side. It's a graph or a table, which is so the input system, if there is no input, it will repeat input, means it will repeat input system until there is an input. So this way we can have the AI running most of the time. Next is if the input system has value, then it will match symptoms. If there is no match, not a single one, it will be asked to re-input the symptoms again. If there is a match, it will show the list. If it's shown list, but the doctors or practitioner did not choose, it will wait for 5 minutes and then notify the choose list for the doctors to know that they have to choose or maybe make a decision. If the doctors or practitioner has chosen, it will show them the medication on how to treat the sickness. The second goal is users would be able to monitor the hospitalized patient status such as heartbeat, blood pressure, blood oxygen saturation and blood temperature. The system will notify the assigned medical or staffs for any health-threatening issues. So the first we start with has patient. If it's a no, it will repeat has patient, which will keep asking the question, is there a patient? If the answer is yes, until it is yes, it will check on the patient condition. If it's okay, if the patient's condition is okay, it will repeat to check again every few seconds or so just to make sure. And if it's not okay, it will notify the staff. Then once the staff is notified and staff is on patient, you will ask if the staff is on patient. If the staff is for some reason is underhanded or understaffed that time, it will keep repeating to us to notify the staff that this patient needs medical attention. Then if the staff is there to check on the patient, then it will repeat back to check patient condition. It will repeat the system to checking the patient's condition until there is no more patient.
My name is Xiang. Today I'm going to present on the PAS model and also prototype. What is mean PAS model? PAS model shows the properties present in the AI application. There is 5 properties. First one is performance measure, second is environment, third one is actuators, and the last one is sensor. What is mean performance measure? Performance measures means that what the AI application goals are. And for the environments means that user or how the environment of the AI application is to be used. Third, actuators represent the action or the function of the AI can be do. And last one is sensor. Sensor is showing how the AI receive input to the system. So next slide is, in this case, our performance measure is healthy patients and also minimize cost. For the environment is patient, hospital, doctors, nurse, and also hospital and administrative staff. For the actuators, there is 2. Notification signals and also the treatment suggestions. And the last one is sensor. There is 2. First one is keyboard, and the second is the measurement or monitor device. Next slide. This is the PAS model diagram 1. We have 2 diagrams. This is the first one. For the first one is in terms for performance measure, we can see the performance that needs to be measured that are in the list of the medical symptom for the performance measure. For the environment in this model diagram 1 is based on the patient and doctors. These are the 2 users that will interact with the sensor during entering the symptom into our system for this diagram 1. And for the diagram 1, actuator is the treatment suggestion for the specific medical condition. And the sensor is the keyboard, which the user can input using the keyboard, input their symptom using the keyboard in this PAS model diagram 1. In PAS model diagram 2, is slightly different in terms of the sensor. In this case, it's not using the keyboard, it's using the health monitor device, where it function to be measure and record patient's current blood pressure or blood oxygen saturation and blood temperature level. This is using the device instead of on the diagram 1 is using keyboard. In this case, is using the device. So for the actuator is same, is receive the signal and given back the notification if the patient is not in the normal state. For the environment is different from the diagram 1, which is there is patient, doctors, hospital administrative staff, and also nurse, which there is bunch of people which can read the data collect through the health monitor device. And for the performance measure is we need to perform that need to be measured is the blood pressure and also blood oxygen saturation and blood temperature of the patient. So next slide is proof of concept, which is our prototype. For the prototype, we are using the online tools called Figma, and we already create our prototype using this Figma, and we share as a link. So now I will going to present on our prototype. So this is our prototype on our system. Once you click, once you start, there is login or register button. So we will skip register. We straightly go into the login, key in your email and password. There you can log in. When you log in, you can see a banner that's showing the latest information of this app. And the main features is these two blue button, search and check patients, where the doctor or nurse or hospital administrative staff can be checks patients status, and also for the doctor can search the disease based on the symptom. So now we're going for the features one for the symptom. In this case, I'm doctor. I'll click on search, and there is a search bar for search for symptom. In this case, I already add 4 symptom. So after you key in all the symptom, doctor able to click search now, and the result will come out according to the AI. According to the AI algorithm, it will search and based on the input key in by the doctor. And in this case, the result is 10, and there is one highest match percentage. So 100% in the green color. So in this case, if I am a doctor, I will select the highest match percentage and see the symptom already match, and also the diseases name. And this is a part where the doctor can decide based on their knowledge, and this is the AI system suggestion diseases for him. So in this case, all matches, which means um, the in this case the patient is having these diseases, which is influenza. So I'm doctor, I will approve it, and the treatment for these diseases will come out, and the doctor can take note and also do proceed for the treatment to the patient, which means that for the last, in this case, the last treatment you see, there's a drug called there's a drug for these diseases. So now I proceed to the features 2, where the AI system, this system also can monitor the status, health status of the patient. So me as a nurse or health administration staff, I will check patients, and also once I click the check patient button, this interface come up with 3 buttons: excellent, normal, or urgent, green, yellow, or red color. So green color is the patient is normal state, yellow is normal, and red color is urgent, which means the nurse or the staff should be having a quick body check and for the patient. So in this case, the patient's status all showing is well, excellent. So for me, I'm nurse, I will check for the first patient, and I see their health status in terms of blood pressure, heart rate, and also other information. So this is our prototype, and the user, this addition features like the doctor can be click on their profile, change their profile, and that's all. And also they can be logged out. So this is our prototype for our apps.
Amiruddin, and I will be presenting on the proof of concept for the SQL database. So for the Doc2U database, we have 3 tables that are included. So the first one is the table disease, table connecting ID, and the table symptoms. Each table functions differently and responsible in storing different types of data. So for example here, we can see table disease. It is storing the type of disease, its treatment, and the DID. So for ID 0, we can see there's a disease called influenza, whereas the treatment is needed to have everyday precautions, antiviral drugs, limit contact with others as much as possible, and cover your nose and mouth with the tissues, and also a prescription for the medicine, also oseltamivir phosphate. And the DID is 0. So what does it mean by this DID? So I try to explain it later. For now, we just skip this one and the table connecting ID, and we'll go to the table symptom first. So the table symptom is responsible in storing the type of symptoms that we have here. So there's one, two, three, four types of symptoms for fever, coughing, vomiting, and sore throat, with its own SIM ID of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this SIM ID and the DID will be connected inside the table connecting ID. So for example here, we can see the DID 0 will be connected with SIM ID 0, 0 DID with 1 SIM ID, 0, 2, and 0, 3. So it means that the influenza, which is the ID 0, the DID 0, will have four types of symptoms here: fever, cough, vomiting, and sore throat. And this is how the data is connected inside the database for the first functions of our Doc2U AI. So let's take a look at the proof of concept in for the code. So for your information, the code is based on the Python language using the module called SQLib3. And the code on the top left function is to connect to a SQL database during the initialization process and check whether the connection is successful and close its connection. So you can see here it connect to the doc2u.db, which is doc2u database, and it will print the connected to the database if the connection is successful. And for the code below the first one is a query as it retrieves an appropriate disease based on the symptom entered. This is based on the first function of our Doc2U AI, where the user will enter symptoms and it will connect to the database and try to find its appropriate disease based on the type of symptom that the user entered. So for example, we enter the example of this data here. We can say it's fever. So there's a 10% chance of the user are having a disease called influenza. And when it's found the type of disease, it will print it out. Maybe the chance and how many type of disease. As every disease might have the same symptoms over and over again, so you listed out all of the appropriate disease. And for the next one, it's also a function, a query for the first function, but this one is the query based on how you get the treatment for the appropriate disease. So for example, the user enter the disease called influenza and will connect to doc2u DB, and then it will try to get and retrieve the treatment appropriate for the disease. So example, for if the user enter influenza, the disease, and it will print out how the treatment will be for that appropriate disease. And the last one is for the second function of the Doc2U AI, where the AI will monitor the health of the hospitalized patients using the health monitoring device. So we have a lot of health monitoring device, but we only listed one example here. And in order for it to be really working, we need a constant stream of data collected from this health monitoring device. And the data will be run through the algorithm and checking via the multiple condition and loops to check whether the patient is in safe or dire health conditions. And we've shown an example of the data for the patient heart rate that is taken for every 5 seconds with an appropriate action to be taken. So let's take a look at the code that on the bottom right. So this code is an example on how the data is get from the heart rate monitoring device. So the first one is that we need to retrieve the data from those devices and store it and run through a loop where it will check whether the heart rate is above 100 or below 60, which is a not normal state. It's an abnormal state. And it will start again for every 5 seconds. So we get a constant stream of data. And if let's say the heart rate of the patient is above 100 or below 60, it will call the function of call PIC, which is calling the person in charge to help or to assist the patient. It could be the doctor or the nurse or any other health practitioners that are available, and we'll try to assist them as possible lah. So this one can get the immediate attention if there's in let's say emergency situation. And the last one is the L statement, which basically mean that the heart rate of the patient is normal between 60 to 99 to 100 lah, basically. So we get to know the different type of situation that the patient might be. And that's all for the proof of concept for the code. And I think that's all. Thank you very much.